I'm Cassandra Lewis, 32, and I watched my parents steal $570,000 from my accounts last spring. Money I'd supposedly saved over 10 years of brutal work hours and careful investing. They thought they were securing my brother Ethan's future, their golden child who could never do wrong. What they didn't know, those accounts were fake. The money was a mirage. I'd spent years setting this trap, knowing exactly what they'd do when temptation arose. Before I tell you how I caught my parents red-handed, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with toxic family members who've taken advantage of you. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut meant a life of material comfort but emotional neglect. Our colonial-style house, with its manicured lawn, projected the perfect family image to neighbors and colleagues of my father, Harold, a corporate attorney, and my mother, Diana, who ran a successful interior design business. From the outside, we were the picture of upper-middle-class success. Inside was a different story. My earliest memories involve understanding a fundamental truth. My brother Ethan was the sun, and our family orbited around him. 5 years younger than me, Ethan learned quickly that tears, tantrums, or charm could get him anything he wanted. My parents reinforced this at every turn. "Cassie, let Ethan play with your science kit," my mother would say when I was 12, even though it was a gift from my grandparents specifically for my interest in chemistry. "But Mom, he'll break it," I'd protest. "Don't be selfish. He's just curious." The inevitable would happen. Broken beakers, spilled solutions, and instead of consequences, Ethan would receive comfort while I received lectures about sharing. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. When I was 16 and had saved $300 from my summer job at the local library for a laptop I needed for school, my parents borrowed it to buy Ethan an expensive gaming system after he failed 3 classes. "He needs motivation to do better," my father explained, as if my academic success required no support or recognition. The most egregious example came when I was accepted to Brown University. My grandparents had established college funds for both Ethan and me. I'd counted on that money, had based my college decisions around it. 2 months before enrollment, my parents called me into the living room. "Cassandra, we need to discuss your college plans," my father said, glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed financial statements spread across the coffee table. "What about them?" "Orientation is in 6 weeks. My mother twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit. "We've had to make some adjustments to your college fund." Those adjustments meant my entire college fund had been drained to send Ethan to Berkshire Academy, an elite private high school that promised specialized attention for students who learn differently. In reality, it was a place wealthy parents sent troubled kids who couldn't maintain grades or behavior standards in public school. "But what about Brown?" My voice cracked. "You've always been so responsible," my father said. "You can take out loans. Apply for more scholarships. Maybe start at community college. We know you'll figure it out," my mother added. "You always do." That night crystallized everything. I wasn't just less favored, I was expected to sacrifice my future for Ethan's present whims. Something hardened in me then, a determination that would shape the next decade. I did figure it out. I deferred admission, worked 3 jobs for a year, secured additional scholarships, and took minimal loans. I graduated from Brown with a degree in economics and financial mathematics, working part-time throughout college while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. Every achievement was met with the same response from my parents, mild acknowledgement quickly redirected to Ethan's latest crisis or accomplishment, usually the former disguised as the latter. "That's nice, Cassie. Did we tell you Ethan's starting a YouTube channel? He thinks it could really take off." After graduation, I secured a position at a financial management firm in Boston. The distance from Connecticut was deliberate. I needed space to build my life without the constant drain of my family's dynamics. My analytical mind and work ethic served me well in the financial sector. I lived modestly despite my growing income, investing carefully and building genuine wealth. The family visits became predictable performances. My mother would tour my apartment, noting things that needed improving. My father would inquire about my financial situation with thinly veiled interest in specific numbers. Ethan, when he bothered to come, would complain about whatever job he'd recently quit or business venture that had failed, always someone else's fault. These visits inevitably culminated in discussions about family obligations. You know, Cassie, my mother said during one such visit 3 years ago, Ethan is really struggling with his student loans from that business program. The program he dropped out of after one semester? I clarified, serving coffee in my small but immaculate kitchen. He wasn't being challenged appropriately, my father interjected. But the loans remain. We thought, since you're doing so well. I'd heard enough variations of this conversation to predict every beat. My responsibility to contribute to the family meant subsidizing Ethan's irresponsibility. When I refused, I was selfish, cold, unfeeling. Family helps family was my mother's refrain, though the help only seemed to flow in one direction. As my genuine savings and investments grew, so did their interest in my finances. Each conversation became more probing, each visit more focused on what I had and what Ethan needed. The resentment I'd carried since childhood evolved into something more calculated, suspicion, and eventually, certainty about what they would do given the opportunity. That's when the idea first formed. Not just to protect my assets, but to expose the truth about our family dynamic once and for all. If they were willing to steal from me, I needed to know. And I needed proof that would make denial impossible. By my 30th birthday, I'd established myself as something of a rising star at Meridian Financial Management. My client portfolio had grown significantly, and I developed a reputation for both strategic thinking and careful risk assessment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd learned to anticipate worst-case scenarios from a lifetime of watching my parents prioritize Ethan's wants over my needs. My actual financial situation was solid. 10 years of disciplined saving and strategic investing had built a portfolio worth substantially more than the $570,000 I would eventually dangle as bait. The real accounts were diversified across multiple institutions, with security measures far beyond what most people implement. This wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Creating the illusion began with establishing digital footprints for accounts that didn't technically exist. I started by opening legitimate accounts at banks different from my primary institutions, depositing minimal amounts to activate them. Then came the meticulous work of generating falsified statements, careful to include the watermarks, account numbers, and fine print that would make them appear authentic. You need to understand the psychology of trust, my colleague Jackson once said during a cybersecurity seminar our firm hosted. People believe documents that look official, especially when they contain details that seem specific and technical. I applied this principle religiously. The fake statements included transaction histories with recognizable vendors, regular deposits matching my salary schedule, and the gradual growth patterns of someone systematically building wealth. I manufactured an investment portfolio showing diversified holdings in familiar companies, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, with performance metrics that mirrored actual market behavior. For 9 months, I dropped subtle references during family calls and visits. Work's been crazy. This market volatility has me checking my portfolios constantly, I mentioned casually during a Sunday phone call with my mother. Portfolios? Multiple, she asked, interest peaking audibly. Just diversifying as I go. Nothing major, I replied, the bait set. During a rare visit home for my father's birthday, I accidentally left my laptop open with a spreadsheet visible showing account summaries and balances. Looks like you're doing quite well for yourself, my father commented, lingering by my computer. I closed the laptop with practiced nonchalance. Just trying to be responsible with what I earn. The spreadsheet had shown a combined total of approximately $570,000, a significant sum, but not so outlandish as to trigger immediate suspicion for someone at my professional level and age. Meanwhile, Ethan's latest crisis was unfolding. After cycling through jobs in marketing, real estate, and restaurant management, he'd convinced our parents to co-sign a loan for a guaranteed opportunity in cannabis distribution just as legalization passed in Connecticut. It's literally a ground floor opportunity, he'd proclaimed at Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone needs supply, and we'll have the distribution network across 3 states. 6 months later, the business had collapsed spectacularly. His partners had vanished with substantial inventory, leaving Ethan with massive debt and our parents on the hook for the loan they'd guaranteed. The amount? Just over $500,000. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for my purposes. My savings milestone had been established in their minds just as a family financial emergency materialized. I noticed my parents' behavior changing subtly. My mother called more frequently, asking detailed questions about my life in Boston. My father began sending articles about helping family members financially and tax benefits of gifts to relatives. "We should really visit you soon," my mother suggested during a call in March. "It's been too long since we've seen your place." "That would be nice," I replied, knowing they hadn't shown interest in visiting in over 2 years. The weekend they suggested happened to coincide with a genuine work conference in Chicago I was scheduled to attend. I mentioned this, watching as disappointment registered in my mother's video call expression. "But I'll be doing a financial systems update before I leave," I added. "I might be hard to reach for about 48 hours while everything transfers." "Systems update?" My father's voice came from somewhere off camera. "Just consolidating some accounts for better interest rates. The bank recommended doing it while I can monitor the process in case of any hiccups." I could practically see the calculation happening behind their eyes. The trap was almost ready. I installed unobtrusive security cameras in my apartment, focusing particularly on my home office. I created convincing but entirely fake online banking portals that would record access attempts. The passwords I used for these decoy accounts were intentionally vulnerable, variations of my birthday, address, and our family dog's name, things my parents might guess if they went looking. Most importantly, I established a tracking system that would document any attempted transfers from these fictitious accounts. If money was moved, I would know exactly when, where, and how much. The night before leaving for Chicago, I called my parents. "Just checking in before my trip. I'll be mostly offline once I start this financial update tomorrow afternoon. Do you need someone to water your plants while you're gone?" my mother asked, too casually. I smiled to myself. No need. It's just a weekend trip, and I have those self-watering globes now. "Well, if you need anything checked on at your place, just let us know. Your father and I could drive up." "Thanks, but everything's set. I'll call when I'm back Sunday night." As I packed for Chicago, I deliberately left financial folders labeled account summaries and investment portfolio visible on my desk. Inside were the carefully crafted statements showing my fictitious wealth. In the top drawer, I placed a handwritten note with account access information, including the vulnerable passwords. The trap was set. All that remained was to see if they would take the bait. The Financial Technology Conference in Chicago provided perfect cover. I gave my presentation on risk assessment in digital banking Friday morning, networking with colleagues throughout the afternoon. No one would find it strange that I was particularly interested in security measures and breach detection. It was literally what I was there to discuss. While maintaining a professional presence at the conference, I monitored the security feed from my apartment on my tablet during breaks. Friday passed without incident. Saturday morning, I participated in a panel discussion, my phone silenced but visible on the table before me. At 1:17 p.m., the security alert flashed on my screen. Motion detected in my apartment. Excusing myself from the post-panel networking, I found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby and opened the security app. The footage showed my parents entering my apartment using the spare key I'd given them for emergencies years ago. "I feel terrible about this," my mother said, glancing around nervously as they entered. My father's response was immediate. "We're just checking on things while she's away. She'd want us to make sure everything's secure during this financial update," she mentioned. They moved with purpose toward my home office, not bothering to check the kitchen or living room, the areas one would typically check on if genuinely concerned about an apartment's security. In my office, my father immediately went to my desk while my mother stood watch at the door. "Harold, hurry," she urged. "What if she has one of those video doorbells or something?" "She doesn't," he replied confidently. "I checked when we came in. Besides, she's in Chicago until tomorrow night." I watched as he methodically opened drawers, quickly finding the folder of financial statements. His expression changed as he reviewed the documents, eyebrows rising, a small smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "Diana, look at this," he called softly. "Our Cassie has been quite the saver." My mother abandoned her post at the door, coming to look over his shoulder. "Is that over $500,000? How is that possible?" "She's always been frugal. And with her salary at the firm." He continued searching, finding the handwritten note with account access information. "This is exactly what we need. This could solve everything with Ethan's situation." "But we can't just take it," my mother protested weakly. "It's her money." My father's justification came quickly. "We're not taking it. We're borrowing it to save this family from financial ruin. Once Ethan gets back on his feet, we'll replace it. Cassie has always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her brother to suffer when she has the means to help." "She's refused to help before," my mother reminded him, "because she didn't understand the severity. This is different. The bank is threatening foreclosure on our home because of that loan. What would happen to family holidays? Where would everyone gather for Christmas? Cassie wouldn't want that." I watched their moral reasoning deteriorate in real time. It was fascinating in a detached, almost clinical way, like observing subjects in a psychological experiment. They spent the next hour accessing the fake banking portals I'd created, using the passwords from my note. The sites looked legitimate, with the same interfaces and security features as real banking websites, but they were elaborate facades I'd built with help from a programmer friend who owed me a favor. "It's asking for a verification code," my father said, frowning at the screen. My mother pointed to my cell phone bill on the desk. "Use her phone number. They usually send codes to your phone." He entered my number, and seconds later, the dummy system generated a fake authentication message to a burner phone I had set up. They input the code, gaining access to accounts showing combined balances of $570,000. "This is it," my father breathed. "This will fix everything." They initiated a transfer of the entire amount to my parents' joint account, an account number I recognized because I'd seen it on documents throughout my childhood. The system showed a processing animation, then a confirmation screen with a transaction number. "We did it," my mother said, but her voice held no triumph. "Should we leave a note?" My father hesitated. "No. We'll call her tomorrow evening when she's back. We'll explain everything then. She'll understand once we tell her about the foreclosure risk." "What if she doesn't?" My mother's voice was small. "She will," he insisted. "Family comes first. Cassie knows that." They carefully replaced everything as they'd found it, erased the browsing history on my computer, and left the apartment, locking the door behind them. From my hotel room in Chicago, I watched the entire process, recording every moment. The money they thought they'd transferred was never real. The confirmation number they'd received would lead nowhere. But the evidence of their attempted theft was now documented irrefutably. Despite knowing this moment would come, despite planning for it meticulously, I felt a hollow sensation in my chest. Intellectual preparation couldn't completely shield me from the emotional reality. My parents had just stolen over $500,000 from me without a moment's genuine hesitation. Their justifications, family obligation, Ethan's needs, Temporary borrowing were transparent lies they told themselves to maintain their self-image as good parents. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at Chicago's skyline. 10 years of suspicion confirmed in a single afternoon. The trap had worked perfectly. Now came the harder part, the confrontation. Sunday evening, I returned to Boston. My flight landed at 6:42 p.m., and I took a rideshare directly to my apartment. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My parents had been careful to leave no trace of their visit. If not for the security footage, there would be no evidence they'd been there at all. I unpacked methodically, then sat at my desk and opened my actual laptop, not the decoy I'd left visible. For 3 hours, I reviewed the footage again, taking notes and preparing for what would come next. At precisely 10 p.m., I called my parents' home phone. "Hello." My mother answered, her voice casual. "Mom? It's Cassie." I worked to keep my voice panicked, unsteady. "Something's happened. Something really bad." "Cassie? What's wrong? Are you okay?" Her concern sounded genuine, which only amplified the hypocrisy. "My accounts, my savings, my investments, they're empty. Over $500,000 gone." I allowed my voice to crack. "I just got back from Chicago and checked everything, and it's all gone." A pause. Then, "Oh my God. Are you sure? Could it be some kind of banking error? The transactions show a transfer to another account yesterday afternoon. While I was in Chicago." "Mom, I've been robbed." Another pause, longer this time. I heard muffled voices, my mother covering the receiver to speak to my father. "Have you called the police?" she finally asked. "Not yet. I'm trying to understand what happened first. The bank's fraud department is closed until morning." I took a deep breath. "I thought I should call you and Dad. I don't know what to do." Maybe you should come home for a few days," my mother suggested tentatively. "Until this gets sorted out." "That's actually a good idea. I'll drive down tonight. I'm too upset to sleep anyway." "Tonight? It's already so late. I need to be around family right now, Mom." I emphasized the word family slightly. "I'll be there in a few hours." Before she could protest further, I ended the call and began packing an overnight bag. Inside went a laptop containing all the evidence, a portable printer, and several USB drives with backup copies of everything. The 3-hour drive to Connecticut would give my parents time to panic, to contemplate their options, to perhaps convince themselves I couldn't possibly know it was them. The night was clear, the highway nearly empty. I drove with mechanical precision, mind cycling through the confrontation scenarios I'd anticipated. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway at 1:30 a.m., lights were still on in the living room. They'd been waiting up, as I'd expected. My mother opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "Oh, sweetie. Come in, come in. Your father's in the living room." I entered the familiar space, noting nothing had changed in the decor for nearly a decade. My father stood awkwardly by the fireplace, hands in his pockets. "Cassie, we were so worried when you called." "Were you?" I set my bag down carefully. "Of course we were," my mother interjected. "To think that someone could just take all your money like that, it's terrifying." I nodded slowly. "It is terrifying. Betrayal usually is." Something in my tone made them both stiffen slightly. My father cleared his throat. "Have you learned anything more about the transfer? Any leads on who might have done this?" "Actually, yes." I unzipped my bag and removed my laptop. "I know exactly who did it." That's good," my mother said uncertainly. "The police should be able to track them down then." "No need for police. The culprits are in this room." The silence that followed was absolute. My father recovered first. "Cassandra, you're upset." "Understandably so. But you need to be careful about making accusations." "It's not an accusation when I have proof." I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. "Yesterday at 1:17 p.m., you entered my apartment using the spare key. By 1:24, you were searching my office. By 2:03, you had transferred or thought you had transferred every cent of my savings to your joint account. The security footage played silently, showing them moving through my apartment with purpose. Their faces on the screen drained of color as they watched themselves commit the theft in high-definition clarity. You were spying on us? My mother whispered. No, Mother. I was protecting myself from theft. There's a significant difference. My father attempted a different approach. Cassandra, you don't understand. We're facing foreclosure because of the loan for Ethan's business. We were desperate. Save it, I cut him off. I heard every word of your justifications on the video. Family comes first. She's always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her brother to suffer. I mimicked his tone perfectly. Did it ever occur to you to actually ask me for help instead of stealing from me? We've asked before, my mother said defensively. You always refuse. I refuse to enable Ethan's irresponsibility. There's a difference between helping and perpetuating harmful patterns. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag. But that's not even the point right now. The point is that you committed theft and fraud. We were going to tell you, my father insisted. We were going to call you tonight, after you got back from Chicago. Explain everything. After the money was already gone. After I couldn't stop you. I shook my head. Do you know what the penalty is for identity theft in Massachusetts? For unauthorized access of financial accounts? For elder financial abuse? Elder abuse? My mother looked genuinely confused. You're 32. The law applies to anyone over 18 in many jurisdictions. The penalties start at 5 years imprisonment and up to $250,000 in fines. Per incident. My father's attorney instincts finally engaged. You can't prove intent. We have access to your apartment. You've given us passwords before. Not to these accounts. And the video captures your explicit statements of intent quite clearly. I turned the volume up on a segment where he specifically mentioned taking the money to solve Ethan's problems. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the front door opened and Ethan walked in. His timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it. What's going on? Mom texted that Cassie was coming over with some emergency. He looked around at our tense faces. What did I miss? Your parents stole $500,000 from me to bail you out of your latest failure, I said flatly. Ethan's expression cycled through confusion, shock, and then, most tellingly, calculation. $500,000? You had that much just sitting around? And you never offered to help when my business was tanking. His reaction confirmed everything. Not outrage at the theft, but outrage that I hadn't volunteered the money earlier. See? I gestured toward him. This is exactly the problem. None of you see anything wrong with taking what I've earned. Family helps family, my mother repeated her mantra weekly. Funny how that rule only applies when Ethan needs something. I turned back to my laptop. But here's what you don't know. What none of you know. I pulled up another screen, the back end of the fake banking system I'd created. The money doesn't exist. My parents and Ethan stared at the screen, incomprehension slowly giving way to confusion. What do you mean it doesn't exist? My father finally asked. I mean exactly that. The accounts you accessed were fake. The statements you found were fabricated. The banking portals were dummy sites I created specifically to track unauthorized access. I navigated through the system, showing the elaborate construction behind the facade. The $570,000 you thought you were stealing was never real. That's impossible, my father protested. We saw the transaction go through. We got a confirmation number. All part of the illusion. The money never moved because it never existed in the first place. I turned to face them directly. What did exist? What does exist? Is evidence of attempted theft, conspiracy, and fraud. My mother sank onto the couch, her face ashen. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because I needed to know if you would actually steal from me given the opportunity. I needed to know if all my suspicions about how you view me as nothing more than Ethan's backup plan were true. I closed the laptop. And now I know. Ethan, ever the opportunist, jumped in. So there's no money? This was all some sick test. No, Ethan. There is money. Just not in the accounts you tried to drain. I've been working and investing for 10 years. Did you really think I'd leave my entire net worth vulnerable to theft? This is insane, my father said, running a hand through his thinning hair. You set us up. Entrapped us. Entrapment is when someone is induced to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. I didn't force you to break into my financial accounts. I didn't compel you to transfer funds without permission. You did that all on your own. My voice remained steady. I simply created an opportunity and observed your choices. What are you going to do? My mother's voice was barely audible. Are you going to the police? The question hung in the air. This was the moment I'd played out in my mind countless times over the years of planning. That depends on what happens next. What do you want? My father asked, the attorney in him recognizing a negotiation opening. Money? We clearly don't have any to give you. I want accountability. I want acknowledgement of what you've done, not just yesterday, but throughout my life. I want you to admit that you've consistently prioritized Ethan's wants over my needs, that you've treated me as a resource rather than a daughter. That's not true, my mother protested feebly. It is true. And now I have irrefutable proof of just how true it is. I removed more documents from my bag, printouts of the video screenshots, transcripts of their conversations in my apartment, and copies of the fake transfer confirmations. I've documented everything. If you can't acknowledge the truth, these go to the authorities. The reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on them. My father's legal mind was undoubtedly calculating the potential consequences, criminal charges, public humiliation, professional ruin. What exactly do you want us to do? He asked carefully. First, I want a written admission of what you did and why you did it. Second, I want you both to attend family therapy, real therapy, not just a couple of sessions for show. Third, I want financial transparency going forward. I need to know exactly what obligations you've committed to in Ethan's name. I turned to my brother. And you? You're the only one who doesn't seem to grasp the severity of what's happened. Your entitlement nearly sent our parents to prison. Ethan's expression darkened. So this is my fault now? You're the one who set up this whole fake money scheme. No, the scheme revealed the truth. Your lifetime of consequences being absorbed by others created this situation. I faced him squarely. They stole for you, Ethan. They were willing to commit felonies because they've spent so long cleaning up your messes that they've normalized criminality. This is bullshit, he spat. You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love me more. The naked admission hung in the air. My mother gasped softly, but neither she nor my father contradicted him. Thank you for your honesty, at least, I said quietly. But you're wrong. I'm not jealous. I'm grieving. I'm grieving the parents I should have had and the brother who should have been my ally instead of my competitor. My father broke the silence that followed. What do you want from Ethan as part of this arrangement? Nothing. I want nothing from him because I expect nothing from him. My conditions apply to you and Mom. What Ethan does is his business, as long as you stop enabling him at my expense. So that's it? Ethan's voice rose. You're cutting me off? Turning Mom and Dad against me with your lies and manipulations. I'm not doing anything except exposing the truth. What they choose to do with that truth is their decision. I turned back to my parents. So, what will it be? Accountability or consequences? The calculation was visible on their faces, weighing decades of established patterns against the very real threat I now represented. My mother broke first. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't realize. I never thought about how it looked from your perspective. Diana, my father warned. No, Harold. She's right. My mother straightened her shoulders. We've always expected Cassie to be the strong one, the one who didn't need us. It was easier that way because Ethan demanded so much, but that wasn't fair to her. This is ridiculous, Ethan interrupted. You're falling for her manipulation. My father remained silent, his attorney's caution battling with parental instinct. Finally, he spoke. What you did, setting this trap, was calculating and cold. Yes, I agreed simply. I learned calculation from watching you manage Ethan's crises my entire life. I learned coldness from years of emotional neglect. Something in my direct acknowledgement reached him. His shoulders slumped slightly. We did try to steal your money, he admitted quietly. We justified it a dozen different ways, but that's what it was. Theft. Ethan looked between our parents in disbelief. You're both going to cave to her demands? After everything you've done for me? After all the sacrifices? That's exactly the point, Ethan, my mother said tiredly. We've sacrificed Cassie for you repeatedly. We just didn't let ourselves see it that way. Ethan's face contorted with rage. This is unbelievable. She sets up this elaborate scheme to make you look bad, and you're thanking her for it. He grabbed his jacket from the coat rack. Call me when you remember who's actually been here for you all these years. The door slammed behind him with such force that the family photos on the wall rattled. One fell, the frame cracking as it hit the floor, appropriately, a portrait of the four of us from my high school graduation. In the silence that followed, something shifted. The family dynamic that had persisted for decades had finally fractured under the weight of undeniable truth. I'll draft the admission letter tonight, my father said quietly. And I'll research family therapists in the morning. My mother wiped her tears. Will you? Will you stay? At least for tonight. I considered the question. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to return to the life I'd built independent of their toxic patterns. But another part recognized this fragile moment of potential change. I'll stay, I said. But in the guest room, not my old bedroom. I need some space. As I carried my bag upstairs, I heard my mother's soft sobs and my father's murmured consolations. The confrontation had unfolded almost exactly as I'd anticipated, yet the emotional reality was far more complex than my planning had accounted for. The trap had worked perfectly, but the aftermath would require navigation I couldn't entirely predict. In the guest room, I sent a quick text to my closest friend, Zoe, it's done. They took the bait. Everything's changing. Her response came seconds later. Are you okay? I stared at the question for a long moment. Not yet, I finally replied. But maybe someday? The weeks following the confrontation unfolded in a series of uncomfortable but necessary conversations. True to his word, my father drafted a 5-page document detailing the attempted theft, their motivations, and a full acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism that had characterized our family dynamic for decades. My mother added a handwritten addendum expressing remorse that seemed genuine, if still tinged with confusion about how we'd reached this point. I returned to Boston after 2 days in Connecticut, needing distance to process everything. The family therapy sessions began the following weekend, my parents attending in person while I joined via video call. Dr. Lillian Freeman, a family systems specialist with experience in financial abuse cases, guided our initial sessions with a firm but compassionate approach. What we're looking at here is a family pattern that's become so normalized none of you could see it clearly, she explained during our second session. Cassandra's method of bringing it to light was unconventional, certainly, but sometimes entrenched patterns require disruptive interventions. My father struggled most with these sessions, his legal training making him defensive and prone to arguing technicalities rather than addressing emotional realities. I still maintain that what Cassandra did constitutes entrapment, he insisted during one particularly tense exchange. Dr. Freeman regarded him steadily. Harold, your focus on the legal definition of entrapment suggests you're still looking for ways to distribute blame rather than accept responsibility. The question isn't whether Cassandra created an opportunity for wrongdoing, it's why you and Diana chose to take that opportunity. These confrontations with truth came at a professional cost for me. I'd requested a 2-week leave from Meridian Financial to deal with family matters, but the emotional toll made focusing on work nearly impossible upon my return. My performance reviews, previously stellar, noted my distraction and lack of usual attention to detail. Is everything all right, Cassandra? My supervisor Jackson asked after a client meeting where I'd missed several key points in the presentation. This isn't like you. I considered deflecting but opted for a version of the truth. Family issues. I'm working through them, but it's taking more energy than I anticipated. He nodded sympathetically. Take the time you need. Your track record buys you some grace. Just don't let it become the new normal. The support I'd expected from friends proved complicated as well. While Zoe remained steadfastly in my corner, others expressed concern about the elaborate nature of my trap. Don't you think it was a bit excessive? My college friend Alana asked over coffee. Couldn't you have just confronted them directly? Would you ask someone who installed a security system if they were being excessive after their house was actually burglarized? I countered. That's different. These are your parents, not random criminals. The relationship made the crime worse, not better. These conversations revealed how difficult it was for people to understand family betrayal unless they'd experienced it themselves. I began keeping a journal, documenting my emotional journey through the aftermath. The entries tracked a pattern, anger giving way to grief, then to a strange sense of liberation as I realized I was finally free from expectations I'd never be able to meet. May 15th, the therapy session today was brutal. Mom broke down when Dr. Freeman asked her directly when she first noticed she treated Ethan differently than me. From the beginning, she admitted. He needed more. The assumption that I needed less was never questioned. I've built my entire personality around needing less, wanting less, asking for less. Who would I be if I'd been allowed to need things? June 2nd. Dad called with updates on their financial situation. The house is officially in pre-foreclosure. He asked if I could recommend options, but specifically said, we're not asking for money. Progress, I suppose. I gave him the contact information for a mortgage restructuring specialist I know. Help without enabling. June 17th, Ethan texted today, first contact since the confrontation. Just 4 words, you ruined our family. I didn't respond. The family was already broken. I just exposed the fractures. Meanwhile, my parents were facing the practical consequences of their actions. Without my fictional $570,000 to solve their financial problems, they had to confront the reality of potential foreclosure and bankruptcy. My father, at 63, couldn't afford to retire as planned. My mother took on additional interior design clients, working weekends to increase their income. During our 4th therapy session, Dr. Freeman guided us through a discussion of financial boundaries. Diana, Harold, I'd like you to share with Cassandra the full extent of your financial commitments regarding Ethan, she prompted. The subsequent revelation was staggering. Beyond co-signing his failed business loan, they had paid off 3 maxed-out credit cards in his name over the past 5 years, $47,000 total. Covered his rent for multiple apartments after evictions, $28,000. Financed 2 car purchases after repossessions, $55,000. Paid legal fees for a DUI and subsequent probation violation, $18,000. Regularly supplemented his income with loans that were never repaid, approximately $2,000 monthly for the past 3 years. Where did all this money come from? I asked, genuinely shocked at the magnitude. My mother looked down at her hands. We've remortgaged the house twice. Taken loans against your father's retirement accounts. Maxed out our own credit cards. And you never thought to just stop? I struggled to keep my tone neutral. He's our son, my father said, as if that explained everything. In their world, it did. He's an adult, I countered. One you've prevented from experiencing the natural consequences of his choices. Dr. Freeman intervened. This pattern is what we call enabling, and it's incredibly difficult to break because it's driven by love and fear, love for your child and fear of seeing them struggle. The problem is that it ultimately harms everyone involved. My mother nodded slowly. I can see that now. We thought we were helping, but we were just prolonging the inevitable and hurting Cassie in the process. This acknowledgement, however small, felt monumental. Ethan's response to the family's changing dynamic was predictable but still painful to witness. When our parents stopped providing financial support, he cycled through anger, manipulation, and, ultimately, desperate attempts to find new sources of funding. He showed up at the house demanding money, my mother reported during a phone call in late June. When we refused, he threatened to sell the car we co-signed for. We told him that was his choice, but we wouldn't be covering any balance remaining on the loan. How did he take that? I asked. He called us terrible parents. Said we'd abandoned him when he needed us most. Her voice wavered. It was awful, Cassie. But we held firm. This new resolve was tested repeatedly as Ethan's situation deteriorated. He lost his apartment, couch-surfed with increasingly distant friends, and finally moved into a shared house with 5 roommates. His social media posts alternated between self-pity and vague accusations about toxic family members who had shown their true colors. I maintained my distance from him, declining his occasional requests to talk things out, when they inevitably came with thinly veiled hints about financial difficulties. The pattern was too established to believe these overtures represented genuine change. By August, 3 months after the confrontation, a new equilibrium had begun to establish itself. My parents continued therapy, both with Dr. Freeman and a financial counselor who helped them develop a sustainable plan to address their debt. They sold their oversized house, the one that had hosted decades of family holidays, and moved into a modest condominium that better suited their actual needs and financial reality. It's strange, my mother admitted during one of our now weekly phone calls. I thought I'd feel lost without the big house, all the space for family gatherings. But there's something freeing about downsizing. Less to maintain. Less to worry about. My own healing progressed more slowly. Trust, once broken so fundamentally, couldn't be repaired with a few months of therapy and apologetic phone calls. I maintained careful boundaries, limiting visits and keeping financial discussions focused on their recovery rather than my resources. Work gradually became a refuge again rather than another source of stress. I channeled my experience into a proposal for a new service at Meridian Financial, specialized financial planning for adult children of financially unstable parents. The initiative earned me recognition from senior management and helped transform my personal trauma into professional growth. This is impressive, Lewis, the VP of Client Services commented after my presentation. There's a real market need here that no one's addressing directly. In September, I received an unexpected email from Ethan. Unlike his previous communications, this one contained no accusations, no requests for intervention with our parents, and no subtle hints about his financial situation. I've been thinking about what happened, he wrote. I'm not ready to say you were right about everything. I still think the way you went about this was messed up. But I can see now that Mom and Dad did treat us differently, and that I got used to being bailed out. I'm trying to figure out how to stand on my own now. It's harder than I thought it would be. I read the message several times before responding simply. It is hard, but necessary. I hope you find your way. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, the first step toward whatever our relationship might become in the future. As fall approached, I found myself reflecting on the trap I'd set and the aftermath it had triggered. The family I'd known was gone, transformed by truth into something still taking shape. The pain had been necessary, the confrontation unavoidable. But the outcome, while still evolving, suggested possibility. The potential for relationships built on honesty rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The money that never existed had ultimately purchased something priceless, the truth. 6 months after the confrontation that shattered our family's facade, I returned to Connecticut for Thanksgiving, the first holiday since everything had changed. My parents' condominium was a stark contrast to our former family home, practical, modest, with none of the pretension that had characterized their previous lifestyle. It's not much, my mother said apologetically as she welcomed me inside, but it's what we can manage now. It's honest, I replied. That's worth more than square footage. The absence of Ethan was palpable but not discussed directly. He'd declined the invitation, still maintaining limited contact with our parents and even less with me. According to my mother, he'd found steady work at a marketing firm and was trying to get his finances in order, though the details remained vague. As we prepared dinner together, something we'd rarely done in the past, with my mother usually insisting on handling everything herself, I noticed subtle but significant changes in our interactions. My father asked my opinion about investment options for his delayed retirement. My mother listened attentively when I spoke rather than scanning the room for Ethan's needs. Small shifts, but meaningful ones. Over dinner, my father raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast. To honesty, however painful it might be. And to the daughter who had the courage to force us to see it. The acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I didn't want to be right, I admitted. I set the trap hoping you'd prove me wrong. We failed that test spectacularly, my mother said with a sad smile. But maybe failing was necessary. We couldn't fix what we wouldn't acknowledge. This new honesty extended beyond our immediate family situation. In therapy, my parents had begun examining patterns in their own upbringings that had contributed to their parenting approaches. My father's parents had valued achievement above all else, creating a mindset where worth was tied to success. My mother, the youngest of 4 sisters, had been alternately spoiled and ignored, leaving her with conflicted views on attention and care. I think I over-identified with Ethan, she explained during a post-dinner conversation. When he struggled, I saw myself. When he needed extra attention, I remembered how it felt to be overlooked. And I went in the opposite direction with you, my father added. You were so capable so early that I treated you like a miniature adult rather than a child who also needed guidance and support. These insights didn't erase the decades of imbalance, but they provided context that helped me understand the foundation of our family dysfunction. Understanding wasn't forgiveness, necessarily, but it created space for something beyond resentment. My own healing journey continued along parallel tracks. Professional therapy had helped me recognize patterns I'd developed in response to my family dynamic, perfectionism, self-sufficiency to the point of isolation, difficulty trusting others' intentions. Acknowledging these patterns was the first step toward changing them. The trap you set was brilliant in its execution, my therapist Dr. Chin had noted, but it also reveals how deeply you expect betrayal. The question now is whether you can build relationships without constantly testing them. This observation had stung with its accuracy. The financial trap for my parents had been the most elaborate test I'd constructed, but not the first. I'd tested friends, romantic partners, and colleagues in smaller ways throughout my adult life, creating opportunities for disappointment and then feeling vindicated when people occasionally failed to meet impossible standards. Breaking this cycle became my personal work. I practiced vulnerability in incremental steps. Asking for help when I needed it, expressing desires directly rather than hoping others would intuit them, giving second chances when appropriate. The support group I'd started for adult children of financially exploitative parents became an unexpected source of healing. Meeting monthly in a community center near my apartment in Boston, the group had grown from 3 participants to 15 in just a few months. Facilitating these discussions allowed me to transform my experience into something constructive. My mother asked for my bank statements last week, one group member shared during a December meeting. I've always provided them without question. This time I said no. It was terrifying, but also empowering. That's a significant boundary, I affirmed. How did she respond? Badly at first. But later she called to apologize. It's a small step, but it felt huge. These victories, small but meaningful, reinforce the value of confronting unhealthy patterns rather than accommodating them. The financial boundaries I'd established with my own parents had held firm. They hadn't asked for money since the confrontation, even when facing difficult decisions about medical care when my father experienced heart problems in October. "We'll figure it out," my mother had said when I inquired about the costs. "Your father and I are learning to live within our actual means." Professionally, my focus on family financial dynamics had translated into a promotion to senior financial advisor specializing in intergenerational wealth planning. My experiences gave me insight into the emotional aspects of money that many advisors overlooked, allowing me to connect with clients navigating complex family situations. "The money isn't just money," I often explain to colleagues. "It's a proxy for power, love, security, freedom." When we ignore the emotional dimension, we miss the real issues driving financial decisions. As winter settled over Boston, I received an unexpected email from Ethan requesting to meet during his business trip to the city. After careful consideration, I agreed to coffee at a neutral location. The Ethan who arrived at the cafe was noticeably different from the entitled brother I'd grown up with. His designer clothes had been replaced with more modest attire, his typical swagger subdued. "Thanks for meeting me," he said after ordering a simple black coffee rather than his usual complicated specialty drink. "I know you didn't have to. What did you want to talk about?" I kept my tone neutral, neither encouraging nor dismissive. He toyed with his cup, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been doing some thinking since everything happened. Some therapy too, actually." This admission surprised me. Ethan had always rejected suggestions of counseling, insisting he didn't need someone paid to tell me what's wrong with me. "That's good," I offered cautiously. "I was angry for a long time. At you, mostly. It was easier than being angry at myself." He met my eyes briefly before looking away. "But my therapist helped me see that what you did, setting that trap, wasn't really about the money." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't. It was about being seen. About having your experiences validated." He took a deep breath. "I never saw how different things were for us growing up. From my perspective, everyone just took care of things for me. I didn't question why or how." The acknowledgement, however belated, caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness or manipulation, not reflection. "Are you still in contact with Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Limited. On my terms now, not theirs. They're trying, but it's complicated. 27 years of patterns don't change overnight." He smiled ruefully. "I'm learning to adult properly for the first time. It's not fun, but it's necessary." We talked for nearly 2 hours, not resolving everything but establishing a tentative foundation for a different kind of relationship, one based on reality rather than the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. As the new year approached, I reflected on the extraordinary events that had transformed my family. The trap I'd set had been born from pain and suspicion, designed to confirm what I already believed about my place in my family's hierarchy of concerns. The evidence it provided had been irrefutable, forcing acknowledgement of patterns too entrenched to be addressed through conventional means. The cost had been high. Our family, as it once existed, was gone, replaced by more cautious, more honest relationships still in the process of redefinition. My parents continued to work through the financial consequences of their choices, facing retirement with far fewer resources than they'd planned. Ethan struggled with the removal of the safety net that had protected him from consequences his entire life. Yet amid these difficulties, something valuable had emerged: truth and the possibility of connections based on authentic understanding rather than obligation or exploitation. In my journal on New Year's Eve, I wrote, "The trap was never really about the money. It was about breaking free from a role I'd been cast in without my consent, the responsible one, the self-sufficient one, the one who needed nothing and could provide everything." The $570,000 that never existed purchased something far more valuable than any material possession. It bought me the right to be seen as I truly am, not just capable, but also vulnerable, not just strong, but also in need of support sometimes. The hardest lesson has been learning that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for any healthy relationship. Money was simply the most visible manifestation of boundaries consistently violated throughout my life. I don't know what my relationship with my family will look like a year from now. Reconciliation is a process, not an event. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly, if at all. But for the first time, we're interacting as authentic versions of ourselves rather than the roles we were assigned. Sometimes a family has to break apart completely before it can reassemble into something healthier. The pieces may not fit together the same way, and some may be missing entirely, but what remains can be stronger for having faced the truth. I wonder about those watching this story. Have you ever had to set a trap to reveal a painful truth? Was the cost worth the clarity it provided? Have you found forgiveness after betrayal, or is understanding without forgiveness enough? Please share your experiences in the comments below and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to seek truth in your own relationships, whatever form that takes.